Hey everybody, welcome to the Monday call. Thanks for being on today. Hope you had a good weekend. As usual, this is the time for you to ask questions, bring up concerns, things that have gone well, things that have gone poorly, questions you have. Any question or concern you have, or any positive or negative things that you want to share are going to be helpful to everybody on the call. So never feel shy about using these calls to do that. So if we have any questions, as I kind of get going here, would you interrupt me, Tricia, and we'll address those. One of the things I do want to talk about, we've had several people in the last couple of weeks have done the event, in which one of the reasons that people make appointments is for Social Security information. So the two reasons people make appointments is either for Social Security information or to get their assets run through the sale presentation. And I've gotten quite a few questions about people from the advisors saying that are really concerned about getting the software to run the Social Security numbers, which is terrific because we're going to need to do that. But I have a question for everybody. Let's see some answers on the chat board. When should an advisor be worried about running the numbers for Social Security? If they had an event, let's say today, and they started seeing people tomorrow, when should they worry about running the Social Security numbers? See if anybody has an answer for that. Because since the beginning of the year, we've talked extensively about the reasons and what we do at each of the meetings. So when would we need to worry about Social Security numbers?
We have someone that said
third meeting, Frederick says. After the prospect commits, Rick says no. Frederick is right. Terry is right. After the third meeting, after the disclosure meeting, Jeff is right. So absolutely, good job, you guys. Because they're going to come in, and here's the problem we have with a lot of guys. They're going to come in, and if they made the appointment to find out how to increase their Social Security, obviously you're going to have those questions at the first meeting. If they ask those questions at the first meeting, did we do the first meeting correctly? Mickey says meeting number 2. No, it's in meeting number 3. So we have to make sure that we do not let them ask those questions. And how do we make sure we don't let them ask those questions? That's what setting the tone is about. If you master setting tone, they're not going to ask those questions. So we need to make sure that we have, we need to make sure that we can run those numbers, but we're not going to worry about those numbers until the third meeting. So great. Everybody, thank you. Mickey, Terry, Frederick, all you guys have the right answer, so that's terrific. So just make sure that you're not, because if you answer, we'll answer this question, guys. If they come in and they're coming in to get those Social Security numbers answered, and you answer them at the first meeting, what's going to happen at that point? Bye-bye, Terry. You're exactly right. They got everything they needed, and what are they going to do? Go right back to their current guy. Jim asks, are we having good success with the Social Security works? Yeah, we're having. Our average right now is 61 people in the events. I guess our low is 35. We've had as high as 101. So they're working out quite well. So and appointment-wise, some of the new guys are getting about a third of the people to set appointments, but that will continue to go up as they get more exposure and more practice. Our average is about 50%, with as high as 75% appointment ratios at those. So I should say as high. We've had people get higher than 75. But that's a rare. That's a guy who's very, very good at doing seminars that can do that. So, but 50% to 75%, with the new guys getting about a third appointments there. So, so exactly right, Mickey. You're right. Done and gone. That's what's going to happen if we give them those answers. But let's say that they corner us. Let's say they corner us, and they absolutely, even though we've stumbled at setting the tone, or we've done setting the tone really, really well, but these people are just focused on getting that answer. First of all, if we've done the setting the tone really well and they're just focused on getting this answer, what are they telling us? What's the chance of us getting them as a client? Not going to be a client here, right? None, Frederick, exactly right. So if all they are is focused on getting that, no matter what, they ignore the setting the tone, they completely are belligerent, and all they want that, then you know what? They're not going to become a client anyways. They're part of that 50% that we say goodbye to. But the thing we have to understand is that we have to go back and listen to our tape to see, did we do a good job setting the tone? Because if we didn't do a good job setting the tone and they're asking that question, they're not being belligerent. It's just that we didn't do our job as an advisor setting the plate. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So, and now why can't we? Why would it be well, why can we not answer that question at the first meeting? Why can we not answer the Social Security question at the first meeting? Somebody tell me that. Because I've had advisors say, well, if they're coming in to answer that question, I don't think it's right not to give them that answer. And I go right back to them and say, you know what? Then I don't, you're malpractice, exactly right, Jeff. You don't have their info, right, Mickey? And you don't have nearly enough information. Exactly. So that's right, Dale. So the thing is, I've had guys say, well, if they're answering the question, ask that question, you don't answer it, I don't think that's right. Well, I jump right back in their face and say, you know what? If you answer that question, you have performed malpractice because you do not have enough information. You cannot give them the numbers at the first meeting. You need to, this is important information. You don't want to make a mistake. You want to make sure that you have all of the answers. So that's great. Well, thank you guys for, I just wanted to get that in because we've had a lot of those questions in the last week via email and a couple of phone calls. So thanks, everybody, for that. So any other questions we want to talk about before we get started? And then does anybody want to raise their hand and be a sounding board? I'm going to have Jeff on with me as well for today's call. I want to talk about an extremely important, it's not, well, I think this is one of the more important calls that we're going to have, and it's about the psychology of the people we meet with and also the psychology of ourselves. Because if you don't understand those things, you're going to have a hard time selling. I would tell you what the number one skill you need to make $1 million a year is to get in your client's shoes, to think like a client. And I spent 8 years thinking like an advisor. And the year I went, and that's what I was making $50,000 a year thinking as an advisor. The main change I made, and recording all my meetings helped me do this, the year I changed into getting in the client's shoes, my income went up not by 7%, but by 700%. 7 times, from $50,000 a year to $356,000, once I started getting into the client's shoes. So that's what I want to spend some time today walking through it on how our psychology gets in our way, and all the things, the biases that our clients or prospects have that we can actually step around or step over, which will help us get into their shoes. So do we get anybody raising their hand to help us out, or am I going to be, Jeff and I going to do it this morning there, Tricia? Tricia.
Sorry, I was muted.
Okay.
I have a couple hands raised, and then Mickey
Okay.
has also volunteered, so I'll go ahead and
Super.
unmute their lines. So we've got Mickey,
Super.
Jim, Terry, and Frederick.
Mickey, Jim, Terry, and Frederick. Okay. So this subject that we're going to talk about today is so important that the CIA actually trains its agents extensively on this particular thing. So it's cognitive biases, and cognitive biases are a pattern of poor judgment often triggered by a particular situation or a shortcut. And the reason we have been programmed for this is all of our ancestors would not have survived if they did not have this cognitive bias. See, it enables us to make faster decisions for survival. If we saw a lion coming at us, and we sat down and thought, see, that's a lion. I wonder why he's charging me. I wonder if he's hungry. Oh, and if he's hungry, he might be thinking about me as food. Oh, I better run. If that's the way we process this, what would we be, guys?
Food.
Food. We'd be food, exactly right. So a lot of the things that we've done have been hardwired into us, so that we can react quickly to things. And we, unfortunately, in modern society, things have become much more complicated than being eaten by a lion. But our brains still try to take these shortcuts, and that can cause us to make bad decisions. So this is important for 3 reasons. 1 is fraud prevention. 2 is sales enhancement, and 3 is self-improvement. So we're going to walk through all of these. So fraud prevention, I want to talk about this first because this is a way for you to talk to your clients about this particular issue and make sure that you don't get caught. Because I just talked to one of my advisors who's been in the industry for 25 years, and he came to me with this great process. He wanted me, and the reason it came up is he wanted me to design a 5Q process. And I'll talk to you about what that 5Q USP was about here in a second. So fraud prevention, this actually comes from information from the Securities Exchange Commission. They've done extensive studies on this, and this was an interview with the head of the Securities Exchange Commission. And he said one of the things that everybody believes that only greedy, gullible, or stupid people fall for fraud. So would you guys agree with that or not agree with that?
No.
No, it's exactly right. It's not. I would have to admit guilt here. I thought that only greedy, gullible, and stupid people did fall for fraud, but actually looking at the points they're making, the research they've done, that is not the case. See, here's the one thing that they found all victims have in common. All of the victims believed that they were too smart, too sophisticated, or too sensible to fall for fraud. So why would that make them victims of fraud, do you think, guys? So Jim, why do you think that would make them a victim of fraud?
I guess because they believe they're more intelligent than the presenter.
Well, if they're more intelligent than the presenter, then would they fall for it?
Probably not. Yeah.
So, Frederick, why do you think?
Well, I think that they believe they can make distinctions, and through those distinctions separate what is real from what is not real, and on that basis, go forward with what appears to them to be reasonable.
Exactly. So if you feel that you're smarter than the person who's presenting something, instead of them being smarter than you, what do you tend to do? Do you think that you can get tricked?
No.
No.
And if you don't think you can get tricked, Terry, then what happens to the likelihood of you being tricked?
You get tricked.
Yeah, because if you're cautious and think, I may be tricked, they may be trying to trick me, then what's the likelihood of you being tricked? Goes down, doesn't it? Because you're suspicious, you're worried about it. You know, that's the difference between myself and my wife. See, my wife is very, very suspicious. So she's my brake. I'm the accelerator, she's my brake. You ever seen that commercial? And it's because she's suspicious of everything. So I'd be more likely to be tricked than she would. Because she's like, there's got to be a catch here or whatever. And see, but I think I'm too smart to be tricked, which means I'm more likely to be tricked. They've done the research on this. So the first thing you have to do is admit that you're vulnerable. And I'm not telling you guys this. I'm telling you this to communicate to your clients. Admit that you're vulnerable. See, and here's the one thing that the people will say is, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Guess what the SEC found out about that particular statement? Is that a good way to prevent fraud?
Yeah.
You'd think, but their point is that only amateurs, only amateurs would be caught that way. Because a true con man, it's going to sound totally reasonable. And I will tell you that back in the mid-'90s, I got caught with this. I sold, what do you call those things? Promissory notes. And it seemed totally reasonable. Totally reasonable. And I will tell you that I'm going to talk about a number here, I think on the next slide or the next slide. And they all present, and I've seen, they had beautiful brochures. It all made sense. It was about, umbilical cord blood and hurricane shutters and all of those things. It sounded totally reasonable, but guess what? Luckily, my clients got their money out, but you know what happened to a lot of clients that didn't get out soon enough?
They lost their money.
They lost their money. So I only had 2 clients in it, and I pulled them out fast enough that they got their money back. But it ended up being a very well-run, nationwide scam, and it seemed totally reasonable with beautiful brochures. And hey, it was right after Hurricane Andrew, so of course everybody needed what? Hurricane shutters, and then the umbilical blood. You know, they were I forget what was in the news, but it was all about being able to store your own blood to your kids' blood, so they would have it for the rest of their lives, and they would freeze it. So it was all this. It all made sense. So if it sounds too good to be true, yeah, you should follow that rule, but that's not the only rule. Because even things that sound totally reasonable can be what?
Fraudulent.
Fraudulent. So, see, only rookie con men make that mistake. But here's the number. Over and over and over I see this. It's 1% a month. Does 1% a month seem reasonable? And they all use these numbers. It's what Madoff did. 1% a month. Does that seem reasonable to everybody? When we see the market, how much is the market average up and down nowadays? In a single day, can you see the market? How much can you see the market go up? Even on a typical day, how much do you see the market go up and down on a typical day?
3 or 4%.
3 or 4%. So just trapping or capturing 1% a month, does that seem reasonable?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. How about so when they guarantee you 1% a month, that seems totally reasonable. That's what Madoff was doing. And I'm going to go back to this number here a second. 1% in a month, that seemed reasonable. So he trapped just stupid people or a lot of very bright people?
A lot of very bright people.
A lot of very bright people, because 1% seemed doable. But now let me ask you a question. Does a guaranteed 12% a year seem doable?
No.
No. But a guaranteed 1% a month seems doable, doesn't it? Oh, we're getting a lot of background, so if any of you are on a speakerphone, you need to mute yourself because that's not going to work for us. So we're getting feedback here. So is anybody, Mickey, Jim, Terry, Frederick, are any of you on a speakerphone?
No,
No.
I'm on a headset.
It's the headset.
Okay, well, whatever it went away, so that's good. So 1% a month seems reasonable, 12% doesn't, but isn't that the same thing?
It appears to be, but when I first ran into a Madoff con, it came out of the Boca Raton. This is Fred speaking. It came out of the Boca Raton Country Club, and it was at a time, where if you could get, a 4 or 5% return at the end of 12 months, that would have been, all-star proportions, and Madoff. And the pitch by the Madoff aggregator to this woman was that she could get 7 or 8%, and it was totally impossible. But that's what she did, and it didn't matter that it was impossible. But at least for that term, for whatever that term was, while he was, getting money from other folks and paying it out in this tontine scheme, it was effective, and no amount you could not dent this person.
No.
And that was the first time I heard of Madoff, and that was about 8 years ago.
So here's the thing. The promissory notes in the mid-'90s, guess what they were promising? 1% a month, 0.75 to 1% a month. The advisor who called me a couple of weeks ago wanted me to help develop a 5Q USP. He was promising his clients 1% a month using currency trading. Now, this is a huge scam that's going around. Just here in Minnesota, we had 3 financial advisors brought down for this currency trading 1% a month. And, guys, it seems so reasonable when you go to a client, you show them this currency trading, and they think, capturing 1% a month, that's easy. And 1% a month times 12, that's 12%. That's easy. This 1% a month tends to be what these cons focus on, because that seems totally reasonable to everybody. But when you start thinking, well, 1% times 12 months, that's guaranteed 12% a year. It's not. So that's how they get around this. Do not allow yourself, especially there's a ton of these currency trading things going around. Stay the hell away from those things, guys. Okay? Stay away from promissory notes. Stay away from currency trading. Stick to what? Products that are what? Licensed. You're right. Annuities are licensed. They're regulated. Stay with regulated things. I guarantee you, if you get away from regulated things, guess what's going to happen? You're going to get into a hill of beans of problems, and the likelihood is you're going to lose your license and lose your practice and lose a lot more than that. So, but they're taking, these con men and these cons are taking the shortcut of this 1% seems reasonable. So people will go into it with, and I've seen advisors get hooked with this over and over and over. Don't fall for it. Okay, so that's all I want to talk about is fraud. So now let's get into how it will help us make more money. So sales enhancement, that's how we're going to look at this cognitive biases. So cognitive bias is a general term that is used to describe many distortions in the human mind that make it difficult and that lead difficult to eliminate and lead to perceptual distortion, inaccurate judgment, or illogical interpretation. So again, the same people who thought 1% was reasonable would have said 12% a year was unreasonable. But because of these cognitive biases, that's where you get trapped. So the reason that these people have all these cognitive biases is self-preservation. So you're going to find as we go through many of these cognitive biases that all of it is about protecting the self. So there's over 100 known biases. And there's several different types. One is decision-making biases. One is behavioral biases, probability biases, belief biases, social biases, and memory errors. And we can't cover all of them, so I'm just going to go through so that you can see how our brains work, more importantly, how your clients' brains work, because if you don't understand this, it's going to be impossible to climb in their shoes. Because on the outside, for a person looking in on the outside, do you think cognitive biases seem reasonable or unreasonable? When somebody's making a decision based on a cognitive bias, and I'm sitting there on the outside looking in, do I think they're just completely cracked, or does it look reasonable to me? If I'm looking in.
Reasonable?
You think reasonable, Terry? Maybe.
Correct.
I think it looks cracked. Who said cracked? Is that Jim?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why would you say it looks cracked?
From the outside in, you can just see all the fallacies of it.
Yeah, you can see the fallacies because I don't. Yeah, because you don't have anything vested in it, right? There's no self-preservation going on when you're looking in, right?
Right.
So you look at these people and say, how the heck could they have made that decision? But to the person making the decision, it seems totally reasonable because of these biases. So we can't cover all of them, but I want to go through several of them so you can understand what's happening with your clients. So the bandwagon effect, we actually use that to our advantage. What is the bandwagon effect? It's where if one person does it, it obviously is what? Good.
Okay.
If 100 people do it, it's obviously great. If 1,000 people do it, it's fantastic. So we use that. It's one of the principles of influence that we use, that consensus. People don't want to be the first person to use something. They want to be the 100th person to use something or the 1,000th person to use something because they figure if something bad would have happened, it would have happened to one of those other people. So it obviously must be okay. Is that what all of Madoff's clients found out after 10 years? The ones that came on 10 years later and they showed the whole client list of all these famous, rich, smart people, did that help them?
Yeah.
Sure, you're sucked in a lot easier.
Yeah. So did it help though? Was that a good decision, or was their decision-making process short-circuited by this cognitive bias?
Bad decision.
Bad decision. They instead of vetting it, instead of doing a lot of research, instead of figuring out if this is a good decision, they just looked at that client list and said, geez, if all those people are doing it, it must be what? Oh, we're getting that feedback again, so whatever...
Somebody's doing their dishes.
Okay. Yeah, so whoever's doing that, because you just happened again, and then you stopped it right there. So whatever you were doing that time and this time, let's not do that anymore, so I appreciate that. So bandwagon effect, confirmation bias. Interpret information that confirms one's own beliefs. And there was a study done, I think, Jeff, was it at Emory University?
About the Abu Ghraib prison, yeah, that was
Yeah.
Emory University.
Can you go walk through that?
Well, they were talking about, when Abu Ghraib happened, they were doing a psychological study, and they used it as an example. So what they were asking people was, do you think Abu Ghraib was avoidable, or do you think the military was responsible for it, or do you think it was unavoidable? It was just something that happened. So people come in with opinions. And they divided people into two groups. Those who thought, the military is totally responsible, they needed to be more careful, they're at fault. And those that thought, well, it's not really the military's fault, it's war, things happen, and sometimes things spiral out of control, it's really nobody's fault. And if you thought it was the military's fault, they gave you a stack of proof that said, no, it's not the military's fault. A bunch of reports, a bunch of magazine articles, a bunch of all kinds of stacks of legitimate proof that you're wrong. It's not the military's fault. They gave the other people who thought it wasn't the military's fault a big giant stack of proof to say that it was. So everybody's confronted with a stack of proof that goes against their opinion. And guess how many people change their opinion in light of the stack of proof? You think a lot of people change their opinion?
No.
Yeah, not very. No, why not, Frederick?
Because they're confirmed in their view, and you're just not going to shake them. And the more you push them, the more they get dug in like a tick.
Yeah, they found out that actually they could tell whether you were going to think it was the military's fault or not by your answers to 3 questions that they asked you before they separated you into a group. One was, are you a Republican or a Democrat? Another was, how do you feel about groups like Amnesty International? What's your opinion of groups like Amnesty International. And number 3 was, have you ever been in the military? And with 90% accuracy, just from your answers to those 3 questions, they could tell whether you were going to feel like it was the military's fault or whether it was, not the military's fault. And that's because we develop biases from our experiences. And we don't change those biases even when we're confronted with proof. We look for things to confirm it, and then we kind of argue with people who don't believe the same thing or don't have the same experiences that we have.
And the importance of that, guys, is guess what? Every single advisor that I've ever worked with who comes onto the system, guess how they try to sell? With what? How do they sell? How do they try to get the client to make a decision to move their money and invest with them? With what? Proof. Graphs. Hypotheticals. Guess what? Is that going to change their opinion of their current investments? Is that going to change their current opinion of annuities? Is that going to change their current opinion of the marketplace? Is that going to change their current opinion about interest rates and what's going to happen with the economy?
No.
No, it's not. You're right, Terry. It's not going to. Yeah, everything we do here has nothing to do with proof. Because as Frederick said, the more you try to prove something, the more they're going to dig in like a tick and push back and say that's not, your information is invalid. So if you'll notice, anything we do, we never try to prove anything. Never, never, never try to prove anything because it's impossible to prove something to somebody. They believe what they believe, and what's the only way we're going to know what they believe? Jim? What's the only way for us? Yes, they have to say it out loud. Can we assume we know what they believe?
No.
What if they nod when we say something? Does that mean they believe us?
No.
No, exactly right, Frederick. No, Terry. No, it means nothing. So the only way I know anything is they have to say it in their own words. So that's why everything we do at the disclosure meeting is all about them telling us because we don't know what they believe about anything. So any point I want to make, I can't make. So any point I want to make, if I can't make it, then that means what? Mickey.
I actually had to mute Mickey's line. I think he was the one that was giving feedback.
Okay, super. So, Frederick, if I have a point I want to make, but I can't make it, then what has to happen?
Well, you have to lead the
Yes.
prospect or the client and get them to tell you in their own words what it is.
Exactly. And that overcomes the confirmation bias, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So the next one is illusion of control, tendency to overestimate one's degree or control over external events. How many clients do you know have told you that they're going to pull out of the market before it goes down? Have you ever heard that before?
Mm-hmm.
Is that possible, Terry?
No.
Because if it was, where would they be living right now?
In a castle.
In a castle, exactly. It's impossible.
I was going to say living at Pebble Beach next to
Yeah, exactly. They're going to be. I'd be
In a castle.
in a castle, exactly. So I'd be living on an island all by myself in a yacht in the Mediterranean is where I'd be living. So the illusion of control, tendency to overestimate one's degree of control over external events. This we have to deal with, and the way we deal with it is by asking questions so they can see that that is reasonable. Can we tell them it's not reasonable, guys?
No.
No.
No, we have to have them tell us it's unreasonable. Irrational escalation. People justify increased investment in a decision based on prior investment. What do you think I'm talking about there, Terry?
Something happened good one time, so they assume that they can make it happen again.
Yeah, that's part of it, yep. And so the thing is the more they're vested in a situation, the more it's going to be hard to get out. So where I've seen this is if somebody owns company stock, and that's where they work their entire life. Or people invested in something, and then it went down, they invested more in it, and it went down, they invested more in it. What do they feel they need to do?
Recoup their investment.
Yep, and is that logical?
No.
No. It may be or it may not be, but simply saying, I've lost all this money and I need to get back to ground zero, that's not logical. looking at the company and saying, well, geez, you know, they've got a ton of money in cash, they have no debt, they have good products, this was just a temporary thing. That's logical. But just looking at it and saying, hey, this has gone down, so it's got to come back up, is that rational?
No, it's like a gambler.
Yes, exactly. It's just like a gambler. Reactance. The urge to do that, and Frederick just talked about this with his analogy of a tick. The urge to do the opposite of what someone wants you to do out of a need to resist perceived attempt to constrain freedom of choice, which means that the more you push, the more they'll what?
Push you back.
Push you back, exactly right. So one of the things we have to avoid doing, and this is when I was making $50,000 a year, this is exactly what I was doing. I was proving that I was right, and I proved I was right every single time, and what'd that get me, Jim? What'd that get me, Terry?
$50,000 a year.
$50,000 a year. So I won every battle and lost every war. The urge to do the opposite. So here's why we do some of the things that we do with the 5Q system. Do you notice that, for example, in setting the tone, I say when I'm talking about how much people pay, the last thing I say about talking about how much people pay, I say, and just like you're sitting here today, Terry, half the people take this information, they go home, and they don't become a formal client. So what am I doing there?
Giving them an out.
Giving them an out. And it's about giving them outs, giving them outs, giving them outs, and if they feel they have tons of outs, they don't ever feel like they have to be pushed. And that's a cardinal rule of the discipline, the psychological discipline of motivational interviewing. You always have to let them know that they can make their own decision. If you look at the Yale close for the event, the first thing we do is make sure they know what? We make sure we say, hey, listen, can anybody make you do anything? Can anybody make you go down to the Social Security office and try to drill them to figure out how to increase your Social Security? Can anybody make you put all of your assets through the sale software to determine how to get a higher return with less risk? Can anybody make you do anything, folks?
No.
That's why do we start the Yale close with that? Because the Yale close is based on motivational interviewing. Why do they start the close with saying, hey, nobody can make you do anything?
Makes them feel in control.
Yes. And when people feel they're in control, Terry, they're more likely to do what? Make rational or irrational decisions? Relax and make rational decisions. Because if you don't feel like you're out of control, do you make rational or irrational decisions?
Irrational.
I mean, when I feel I'm out of control, I am making knee-jerk reaction after knee-jerk reaction after knee-jerk reaction, and I ended up being what? In a worse situation. So our whole system is designed around the fact that we know that people have a tendency that if you push them, they'll push back. So one of the things we teach is get on their sides. So when they give us an objection, first thing we do is do what? Say absolutely. Agree with them. We give them an acknowledgement. Absolutely. Or that makes total sense. And then we do what? We repeat it back to them in the form of a question. So that they'll end up saying yes to us. If they say yes to us, guess what we no longer have? Push.
Push back.
No, we're both pulling the same direction at that point, right? And then we get on their side, get on their side, get on their side. Our whole system is designed around preventing reactance. Because once a relationship is based on reactance, guess how hard it is to get out of that type of relationship? Very, very difficult. In fact, the research that motivational interviewing has done, the scientists or the psychologists that put this together and researched the motivational interviewing found that if you had just one instance of reactance, guess what happened to the likelihood of success? Just one instance. You could have 3 hours of a fantastic meeting, and then you have one instance of reactance, and guess what happens to the likelihood of success? Wiped out.
Yeah.
Wiped out. 99% right, 1% wrong, 1% destroys all the 99%. That's how powerful reactance is. We're built in with a resistance to have people to tell us what to do. Loss aversion. Giving up something is more difficult after you already have it. Here's how we use that. When you do the disclosure meeting, should you actually let them have their own copy right there as you're going through it of the proposal?
No.
You should while you're right. You're right and wrong, Jim. You should give it to them, but then before they leave, you do what?
Take it back.
Take it back. And why do you do that? Why does the car dealership so anxious to get you or eager to get you into for a test drive?
Get your information.
Well, yes, but more importantly, this, and they prove that makes you want it. They, when color TVs came back out in the 1950s, the hardware stores where you bought them, and hardware stores actually, one of this hardware store in Indiana developed the test drive. They actually sent color TVs home with people to try them out for a weekend. Guess how many of those color TVs were purchased?
100%.
Basically 100%. And more importantly, guess what that caused? Because guess what those people with those color TVs did during the weekend? They invited all their friends over to see the color TV. Guess who came in that following week? Oh, please, we're having that again, Tricia. Yeah, all their neighbors' friends came in. So once you put it in something into somebody's hands and then take it back, it's really difficult for them to, or it makes them really want it that much more. Have you ever seen those videos where they give somebody those fake lottery tickets to win $10,000? And then they, after the person goes through all their dancing jigs and excitement, whatever, they say, look on the back to where you pick it up and it says that your mama's house. And what happens to those people? I mean, there's some fist fights that are broken out over that. But if you think about it, they didn't have $10,000 before, and they don't have $10,000 now, so really there's no difference there, right? What's the difference?
The hope, the desire.
Yeah, they had it, and then it was taken away. That has a huge effect on us. So you're right, Jim. We actually give them the proposal at the disclosure meeting, but then we take it back. You never let them bring that home. Why don't you ever let them bring that home?
They'll take it to their other
give it to their other guy.
Yeah, they'll take it to the other guy. Mere exposure effect. We use this a lot. The tendency to express undue liking for things merely because we're familiar with them. The more you see something, the more you believe it. And we use this quite often, and I won't go into how because we don't have time, but in the 5Q system, we'll have people saying, we'll state something, and then we'll bring it up again, we bring it up again, and bring it up again. The first time people hear it, they say, I didn't know that. The second time they hear it, they say, yeah, I've heard that before. And the third time they hear it, they say, yeah, I agree with that totally. And the next time you say it, they say, yeah, I mean, I'm the one that actually discovered that thing. See, the more they hear something, the more familiar they are with it, the more likely they believe it. And see, it's a problem we have right now in society, and that and again, a lot of these cognitive biases are rolled together. But if you see something often enough, you tend to think it's true. Now, that's a fact that happens, but is that really rational?
No.
No. So, but we do use it with things that are actually true that they may not know. And so what we do is we make sure that they understand things, and we say them over and over and over. And a lot of guys, when they come on the system, will say, why the hell are you repeating yourself over and over and over? We told that to them a half an hour ago. We told that to them again 15 minutes ago. We told that to them again, or had them tell us again 10 minutes ago and 5 minutes ago. Why are we repeating these things over and over and over? Why do we repeat these things over and over and over? Because after the fifth or sixth time they've heard it, guess what? It becomes what?
Familiar.
Familiar, and from familiar it becomes the truth. Negativity bias. Tendency to pay more attention to bad experiences than good experience. And this goes right back. I mean, there's lots of different examples of this, but I'm going to go right back to that whole thing we talked about. If they have 99% great experiences with us, but one reactive experience with us, guess what happened? What they focus on?
The negative.
The negative. They'll find that. So here's the thing. If they have one objection to us, let's say we've had a great first meeting, we've had a great second meeting, they decide to leave their guy, and then they give us an objection. And you're always going to get objections because they're not going to move a lot of money to you without at least one objection. They give you an objection, and instead of saying absolutely and then agreeing with them for 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes, instead you say, well, I can see how you believe that, but let me show you. Guess what just happened to all the good stuff you did those first 2 meetings? That 2.5 hours of work that you've done.
Just went down the drain.
And why would it, Terry? After all that why would that go down the drain? When they hear that, what do they? Yeah, go ahead.
Reactants.
Yes, they have reactants because basically we spoil it all. They go, aha! I knew you weren't as good as you were acting. I knew you weren't the consultant that you're portraying yourself as. See, as soon as I said an objection, what you did is you tried to convince me to move all my money to you. And then all that good stuff goes right out the window. You can't even mishandle one objection wrong. Because if you do that, you immediately identify yourself as the person who just wants to get their money. Because can they really believe, Terry, that we love them so much after knowing them a couple of weeks and spending a couple hours with them, that we love them so much that we're just totally dedicated to make sure that their situation is wonderful? That's how much we love them? Can they? No. No, they don't believe that. So what we need to do is, if we make one misstep here, they're going to say, aha, it was true, all you wanted was my money. And they're going to focus on that.
That's what they're looking for.
Exactly. So you can't even make. Yep, they're cynical. So what you can't do is even make one, because they're going to focus on that. And there's lots of other ways here too, but people tend to pay more attention to bad experiences than good. Normalcy bias, refusal to plan for, react to a disaster that has never happened before. Have we all seen this in 2008?
Mm-hmm.
Have we all seen it in 1999? When the market was going up and internet stocks were going up, how much did people have in those in the market?
Everything.
All in
Yeah, because you'd be an idiot not to have all your money in the market when the market's going up 30%, right? And when you tried to tell them that was idiotic, guess what happened? I'll give you an example of that. I had 3 Mayo docs come to me. Their pensions, they offered them to Mayo Clinic, offered these doctors that they could take a lump sum in the pension. So they came to me, and I looked at all 3 of them, did the math, and it ended up their pension was giving them a 9% rate of return for the rest of their spouse's lives. And I said, guess what I told them? Should they take the lump sum or should they keep the pension?
keep the pension.
Yeah, I said keep the pension. Guys, if you were offered a 9% guaranteed rate of return for the rest of your and your spouse's life. Now, keep in mind, nowadays it sounds terrific, but that was when the market was going up. But I said, keep it. You're crazy. You have all this other money you can invest in Wild and Crazy. Keep that money, guaranteed 9% for the rest of your life. Keep that money where it's at. Of course, they went to other advisors, and guess what all those other advisors said?
Lump sum.
Lump sum, because why? Because did I make any money telling these guys to make money? And it was an easy sale for these guys, because guess what they thought? Yeah, the market's gone up 30%, so obviously, why would I want to make 9% when I can make 30%? Of course, 2 years later, what happened to all their lump sums of pension plans? Gone. Got killed. So, but people refuse to plan for, react to, and that's a lot of what we do, isn't it? What do we tell people they need to do? Hope for the best, but plan for the what?
Worst.
Worst, exactly. Omission bias, tendency to judge harmful actions worse or less moral than equally harmful omissions. So how do we deal with this, guys? This is a huge part of our disclosure meeting. Because if all we show is these 18 or 21 different things that their guy omitted, and all we show is that they just actually omitted it, what do we have? Nothing. Nothing. Because they're going to say, oh, this guy made a lot of mistakes. I'm mad at him. I'm going to make sure he never makes those mistakes again. And then they do what? Go back and they chide their advisor, and their advisor says, I'll never do that again. And what do?
Stay there.
Stay there. So we do not let them think these things were just forgotten. You have to make sure that they judge it as a harmful action. Just forgetting these things is worthless. They have to make sure that they say in their own words that these were harmful actions, and what's the one thing we learned that they have to do that? We have to make sure we do one thing at the disclosure meeting. We learned this last week or the week before, I can't remember. We have to pin what on their advisor?
That it was in the advisor's best interest.
Motive, you're right. But both of you are right. The word we use is motive. If there's no motive, guess what? No harm, no foul. What do you, Jeff? What would your input on this be?
Well, they have to have motive. It's just like Mike said. If they think that all he did was make some innocent, harmless mistakes, they're not going to leave him. They're going to go back and see if they can't get those mistakes fixed. Even in the worst case scenario, even if they say, you know what, these are bad mistakes, and I just can't go and I don't know that there's any fixing them. I need to change these investments. They'll change the investments, but they won't change the advisor. They have to assign some blame or some willful omission or some willful, harmful lack of disclosure to that guy if they're going to change guys.
Because if they think that these things were just forgotten, you have nothing. They'll be angry at their situation. And if they're angry at their situation, guess what you have? And I think we had this conversation last week with Ed, that if all they are is angry at their situation, guess what you have? Is that a good thing or a bad thing, Terry?
It's a good thing.
Nope, it's a bad thing. Because if they're angry at the situation, guess who can cure that situation? Anybody.
Their current advisor.
Yes. They can't be angry at the situation. They have to be angry at what?
The advisor.
The advisor. That advisor has to have done harmful actions. Because human beings assign harmful actions a worse thing, exponentially worse than just somebody happening to have forgotten something. You can't.
I think the hardest thing.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing for guys to get initially is they'll hear the client getting angry and they'll hear the client getting worked up. The client will say, "I'm really ticked off about the titling. I'm really upset that there's an easy way to fix this. I'm really upset that my beneficiaries aren't right. I'm really upset that the fees are high. I'm really upset that I'm taking all this risk."
And the advisor thinks, "Yeah, nailed it."
And that's not, it's not going to help you. They'll go and they'll lower the fees. They'll go and they'll change the titling. They'll go and change the beneficiaries. They'll go and they'll change, the risk level of their portfolio. But they won't do it with you. Why not? Because you're thinking they were mad. And they were mad. But not at the guy. There's a difference between being angry with the situation and angry with the advisor. And until you get that, you'll always be bumping your head against the wall.
Yep. And that's where you have guys get frustrated saying, "But listen, they were angry, and they still took it back to the guy." And when they sent us the tape and we listened to it, we find out they're angry at the situation, but they did not assign motive. And a lot of guys have a real problem assigning motive to people. It's not a comfortable thing. But guys, are we, Frederick, are we doing harm to our competition if we assign blame to them, or have the client assign blame to them?
I had to mute Fred. He was giving feedback on his line.
Oh, okay. So who's on right now then?
We have Jim
I
and
am.
Terry.
Terry. Oh, Jim, Terry. Okay. So Terry, why? Now I forgot my answer. My question. What was my question?
Are we doing harm?
Yes. Are we doing harm, Jim? Let me ask that to Jim. Jim, are we doing harm to our competition if we have them, the client, assign motive to why they might have done something?
Yes, I would.
Should we
think
feel
so.
bad about that?
No,
No. Why shouldn't we?
because if you're doing harm, they're not looking out for the best interest of their client anyway.
Exactly. If they were doing their job, there would have been a problem here. So should we feel guilty at all about having the client discover why the guy forgot to do something?
No.
No.
No, I totally agree. Yeah, exactly. Outcome bias, tendency to judge a decision by its eventual outcome instead of based on the quality of the initial decision. We have this a lot with the fixed index annuities. So if the market goes up 12% and they only make 3%, guess what they think?
They're losing money.
They made a bad decision, right? But did they? Why did they get in that fixed index annuity? To make sure that what happened. They did not.
Downside.
Exactly. So this is something you should cover after it happens or before it happens?
Before it happened.
You're right, Terry. And how well should you cover this before it happens?
Very well.
So that they remember it when it does happen. You can say, "Remember when we talked about this? And what was the reason we did this?" And we said that what could happen. We said the market could go up. And did it go up? It did. But were we prepared for that? Yes. So you have to go through this beforehand, because otherwise it can bite you in the behind. Post-purchase rationalization, tendency to persuade oneself through rational argument that a purchase was good value. This is something that's necessary. You should never sell anything until the client understands it. And the point I make to people is this, is that when you sell something, I guarantee you somebody else is going to get involved. If you sell somebody a fixed index annuity or whatever it may be, and they go home, they're going to talk to their neighbor, their brother, their son, and that neighbor, brother, or son is going to say what? What are they going to say, Terry? Is it a good deal or what?
Oh, no, I heard annuities are bad.
They're going to say, they're going to start nailing it. So what you have to do is prepare them for that. You have to walk them through the conversation they may have, and I wouldn't say may, they will have with a neighbor or a relative or a friend that's going to tell them they made a mistake. And you have to basically walk through all those objections that neighbor, friend, or relative are going to throw up so the client understands. So when the neighbor says, hey, those things are lousy for such and such a reason, they say, oh, no, they're not, because blah, 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 blah. You don't know what you're talking about. Because we're going to use that reactance against the neighbor, against the brother, against the friend, because they don't want to be told what's right or wrong. So you have to, and a lot of guys don't spend the time they should making sure the client understands what it is they purchased and understands all the downsides and understands all the objections backwards and forwards, because they're going to, even if they don't bring them up, somebody's going to bring them up, and you have to bring it up so that they're armed so they can use rational argument on why what they did was a good thing. So when that person tries to attack that action, that the reactance works against that person, that neighbor, friend, or relative. So they start to say, you don't know what you're talking about. You better get educated on this because that's not how it works. It works like this, that, and the other thing. Make sure they understand what it is they're buying. Make sure they understand all the objections, not just nodding their head yes, but they can say it back to you. For example, well, you know, if we know liquidity is going to be a problem, right? Have you ever had a client, Jim or Terry, that liquidity was not an issue whatsoever? No. No. Liquidity is always an issue. So guess what we cover backwards and forwards every time we sell a product? Liquidity. And if I explain liquidity and they nod their head, is that good enough, Jim?
No, you've got to get them to say it.
Yeah, so I'm going to say, well, why do you think this is liquid? I always finish those things with why. Why do you think this is liquid? So they start telling me why it's liquid, because if they can tell me why it's liquid, then when their friend says, well, you know, you're locking your money up there for 10 years, they'll say what? No, I'm not. This is more liquid than having my money in a mutual fund. Let me explain to you why. I hope you don't have all your money in a mutual fund because you're the one that has the liquid money. Mine's a hell of a lot more liquid than yours. See, we're using reactants against them. Does that make sense, Jim?
Yeah.
Okay. Status quo bias, tendency to like things the way they are right now. Guys, our whole system is designed around this one thing because they just assume do what with our information?
Nothing.
Take it back to their current guy and keep things just the way they are. You're right, Terry. That's everybody they want to do the easiest thing, Terry, and the easiest thing is to do what?
Stay where they are.
Yeah, stay where they are. Wishful thinking, formation of beliefs and making of decisions according to what is pleasing to imagine instead of rationality. You know, I had back to 1999. I had a doc client who called me up and said, "Well, Mike, I think he was 35 or something. He says, I think your financial plan you did for me, I think we need to move that retirement date up to 39. I'm like, 39? 4 years from now? Yeah. I said, well, how cause this guy lived a pretty good lifestyle. How do you think you're going to have enough money to retire at 39? And guess what he told me? Well, I ran the numbers, and I'll have more than enough money at 39. What do you think he used for rates of return for his investments?
500%.
Well, 30%. Because, you know, we'd had those 2 years in the late 90s where they had 30%, so guess what he decided? Oh, that's the typical rate of return.
That way.
I was like, are you kidding me? So, I mean, wishful thinking. Guys, anybody looking in from the outside thinks that is what? Cracked. But this is a smart guy. And it took me 2 hours to finally have him realize that, and even when I left, I don't think he realized it. This is before I knew the POP system or the 5Q system, so I tried to explain it, and I talked to him and talked to him and talked to him and explained, and proved, and guess where that probably got me with the guy? Nowhere. Because did he believe, Jim, that he was going to get 30% for the next 4 years?
Yes, he did.
Unbelievable. But that's the kind of thing that goes on in people's heads. Gambler's fallacy, I think you talked about it earlier, Terry. Tendency to think future probabilities are altered by past events. So what happened, just because a crash happened yesterday, does that mean a crash can't happen tomorrow? Can it?
Of course it can.
Of course it can. But you know, our competition, stockbrokers, guess what they try to tell clients? Well, the likelihood of that happening 2 times in a row is what?
Extremely low.
Extremely low. And that's total what, Terry?
Bullshit.
Exactly. Disregard of regression to mean. Tendency to expect extreme performance to continue. We just talked about that with that dot client. Halo effect. This is huge, guys. Tendency of a person's positive or negative traits to affect another person's decisions. That is why you have to have clean clothes. And I know it seems like a stupid thing to say, but I have met guys that have had yellowed collars on their shirts, a stain on their tie, not having a haircut that's decent. Invest in your personal hygiene. The halo effect, I mean, taller people, they've proven, taller people make more money. And that's coming, I'm a very short guy, so I mean, that's a thorn in my paw, but tall people make more money. They get, get prettier wives. They do the taller people get everything. And then they've looked at it. Handsome people and beautiful people get paid more. Handsome and beautiful people are more likely to be elected class presidents, are more likely to be CEOs, are more likely to be promoted, are more likely to get everything in the world. People assign value to how you look. Now, I'm not very attractive, so that means I have to make sure that what, Terry?
Of course you are.
Well, I'm not very attractive. I'm not, and I know that. But that's why when I dress, I make sure that what? I make up for that. And you'll find that short people dress very, very well, and the reason they do is because they have to make up for that. So, guys, I know this seems like to some people it is a stupid thing to even bring up, but the reason I bring it up is because I see it every single day. Make sure that you are immaculate in how you dress, okay? And I'm not talking, don't have to buy expensive suits, but that suit had better be what?
Clean. Clean
and pressed, exactly. You don't have to buy expensive shirts, but the shirt better be clean and pressed. The tie better not have a stain on it or look worn. And shoes have to be what? Shined. Okay? And here's the last thing to cover is the von Restorff effect, which is what we specialize in, which is that things that stick out like a sore thumb tend to be what? If you look at all these guys on the screen right here, Jim, and an hour from now I ask you to describe one of them, which one would you describe?
The red one.
Yeah. So is it better to be better or better to be different?
Better to be different.
Better to be different. Because can you prove, I'm sure one of these white guys is better, Terry, but can I find him? Can I find him?
No.
No. So even though the red guy's probably average.
Being African American is a great thing in this situation.
Well, it could be, absolutely. 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 So you're absolutely right. Any way you can be different, and see, that's why, I mean, as our presentation, is it better than any other presentation out there? No. But it is what?
Different.
Different. It's way better to be different. I would guarantee you the newsletter that I write is not better than any other newsletter out there. There are some unbelievably well-done newsletters with full color and shiny paper and 5 pages and blah, 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 blah. Mine's a 1-page, 1 topic, not about money, but about an ancillary money issue. But it gets read. Why? Because it's better? No. Because it's different. We use the church bulletin effect. People read church bulletins because they're amateurish. They're written by somebody they know. They're about somebody they know. They're about issues that deal with them in particular. So we constantly look at being different. And I know that a lot of advisors really have a problem with that because most of us want to be different or want to blend in.
Most people
Most
want
of
to
us-
blend in.
Yeah, most people want to blend in. Can't do that if you want to be successful because all the way the public views this is as a commodity. We all sell the same things. We all sell them for the same price. We all say we have great, take great care of our clients. The only way you're going to be able to show that you're different is to be different. So don't shy away from being different. I'm not telling you to pour red paint all over you. I'm telling you that any way you can make yourself stand out from all the other people, do it. So I know this was a lot of theory today, but you have to get into the client's heads. You have to understand why they're making decisions. So Jim, what did you get out of the call today?
Be different. No, Mike, it's just a good process. You got to know what they're thinking. You've got to be able to know the situation you're entering into, so you can control it and handle it, and get them to realize what you want them to realize.
Exactly, because if you just go in there and you only have your agenda, what's going to happen?
Not much.
Not much, exactly right. And Terry, what did you get out of the call?
I just got a better understanding of the psychology behind all of the things that we're doing in the appointment process. Just helps me to understand it better as I'm trying to kind of mesh it into my own brain and make it a part of me.
Good, because I mean everything we do is based on psychology, and most of it around motivational interviewing. And guys, this stuff works like a son of a gun when you use it. But that's why I wanted you to know some of the background every once in a while. Just otherwise you start to say, why the heck are we doing this stuff? That's why every once in a while I'm going to throw in a call like this, just so you get why we're doing what we're doing. So Mickey and Frederick, thanks for helping on the call. Sorry we had to mute you there because of feedback, and I don't know what happened there, but we appreciate you guys being on. And Jim and Terry, thank you very much for helping out today. And Jeff, anything you want to add? He's already left.
Sorry, I was muted there for a second. The great thing about the system, guys, is it helps you to have this background, but all this stuff is already built into the script, so focus on learning those meetings. And this helps you to understand why you need to learn the meeting and not stray from it.
Yeah,
you don't have to be experts in all of these different psychological theories, but you do need to be experts in every part of those meetings, because if you're experts in every part of that meeting, you're already using all this stuff and you'll have fabulous success.
Yep. So thank you, everybody, for being on. Thanks for all the people that participated, and I wish you great luck for the next week, and we'll talk to you next Monday. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.